Let's face it, building road decks is hard. However, winning with your own rogue deck, well, that is much more fun. Especially if you can do it with a deck that nobody saw coming. Or even a deck that nobody knows how it even works. Giving you the ultimate bragging rights. That's exactly what we're going to look at here today. The strangest, most wackiest decks that have ever topped regionals or internationals. And trust me, we have some absolutely unbelievable ones. Getting Pokemon into play is absolutely paramount in the Pokemon TCG. There is no point in having a big beefy stage 2 Pokemon in your deck if you struggle to get it into play consistently. This is why the most successful decks tend to be built around basics or stage 1s. Sure, there have been some successful stage 2 decks of course, but it's just much harder to win with them. However, there is another mechanic that never sees play, even harder to get into play than stage 2s. We are talking about fossil Pokemon. These are notoriously bad due to needing to get a trainer item into play before you can evolve them. And this trainer card that we need to get in play, a fossil, cannot be searched with Quick Ball or Ultra Ball or any other kind of ball search card. Because of this ruling, fossil cards are always pretty much bulk. Very bad competitively. This is until the 2019 Pokemon World Championships, where Shintaro Yamamoto noticed that the format was going to be decided by Pikarom and Reshizard. To combat this, he played a fossil box deck, consisting of Aerodactyl GX to counter Pikarom and Caracosta to Oko Reshizard. Luckily for Shintaro, Unified Minds had a Stadium card in the set which would make fossils a little bit more playable. That Stadium was Pokemon Research Lab, which would let you grab 2 Pokemon that evolved from the fossil card and put them straight into play. However, this would end your turn, meaning it was only really helpful if you could find it turn 1, because if you didn't, you was completely stuck, especially considering that Shintaro didn't actually play any of the Stadium cards to begin with, meaning he was 100% reliant on the Pokemon Research Lab to get his Pokemon into play. Not only that, but Shintaro's only way to accelerate energy was Welder, meaning he had to play a split of fire energy and fighting energies at the same time. And even though this should have been sent to Clonk City, it worked really well, and he got it all the way to 66th place at that World Championships with a deck that nobody saw coming. If we was to rewind a little bit from Shintaro's performance at the World Championships, we would find ourselves at the Madison Regionals. Braden Elford wanted to play a welder deck, but he didn't want to just play any welder deck where you put the energy onto Reshizard like everyone else though. He wanted to play something a little bit more crazy. So he scoured the format to find alternative welder targets, and he settled on an absolutely cheeky one. And it took him all the way to 37th place at Madison, and it was so good that Drew Kennett played the same archetype all the way to a 27th place finish at the biggest event of the year later on, the Columbus International. So what was this crazy unknown attacker? Well, it was a monstrous 160 HP stage 1 Pokemon with the attack Powerful Slap, which let you flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon, and you did 80 damage for each one. This means with 3 heads you could Oko tag team Pokemon with a 1 prizer in 1 turn. Welder helped you get those energies into play, Wishful Balance helped you keep those energies into play, and Triple Acceleration Energy proved to be a monstrous 3 flips for 1 attachment. On paper, flippy decks tend to be really risky, because you always run the risk of just flipping all tails and doing nothing that turn. But Blissey was feeling very generous over those 2 events, leading to some top finishes. But I want you to keep Columbus in mind because we'll be coming back there later. But before that though, we're going to go back to the Memphis Regionals. You know, I mentioned before about how stage 2 aren't really that great for competitive play. Well, I didn't have that conversation with Harrison all the way back in 2017 because he chose to sleeve up a Venusaur deck. Now granted, this Venusaur had an absolutely bonkers ability, Jungle Totem, which made all grass energy in play count as 2 grass energies while it's in play. And while this doesn't stack, meaning you can only have 1 Jungle Totem online at the same time, This is a pretty crazy effect, all things considered. Probably one of the only times getting a stage 2 out is actually worth it. Okay, now if Venusaur was paired with some sort of normal attacker, then it probably wouldn't have made this video. However, Harrison paired it with a really cool shining Genesect card, which had the Gaia Blaster attack, which did 50 plus 20 for each energy attached to the Genesect. But wait a minute, if Venusaur was in play, this would actually read 50 plus 40 for each grass energy card attached. And with its ability, which would let you move around one energy at a time, Gaia Blaster started to add up pretty fast and do some massive damage. And it took him all the way to 10th place. Absolutely brilliant. However, if he was to rerun a little bit more, we would look at Darkrai EX, an absolute beefcake of a card that ruled the format for a little while. Its Dark Pulse attack did 20 plus 20 for each dark energy attached to all your Pokemon. And again, in a similar vein to Genesect, this can add up pretty fast. Between Max Elixir, allowing you to attach energies if it was in the top 7 cards of your deck, Oblivion Ring Yveltal, allowing you to get some out of discard, and Double Dragon Energy, providing 2 dark energies while attached to a dragon type Pokemon, you could burst energies into play and hit really hard. However, even though it was pretty fast, it wasn't fast enough for our friend Jimmy, because Jimmy wanted to turn that dial all the way up to 11. So he looked at a different way to power up Darkrai, one that wasn't so slow, and he stumbled upon Dragonair. Dragonair let you attach as many energy cards from your hand as you wanted during your next turn with its attack Dragon Wish. This meant you could essentially sacrifice your Dragonair, and then when it comes to your next turn, you could explode with Shaman to set up draw cards, Professor Sycamore, and Professor's Letter, as well as energy retrievals, and you could go bonkers just flinging them all into play from your hand, resulting in utter detonation for your opponent. Bear in mind, you could also attach double dragon energies with this as well. And this worked really well for Jimmy, as he got 23rd place at Sheffield Regionals. But it didn't stop there, because it also got 50th place in the Indianapolis International and 12th place at Birmingham Regionals as well. What a fun take on an otherwise boring meta deck. This last deck, however, left everyone's jaws dropped and speechless when we saw it make top 8 at the biggest event of the season. We have come all the way back to Columbus, which we mentioned earlier. Hunter Butler looked at the meta filled with Pikarom, Reshizard and Zoroark, and he thought the best way to combat this onslaught of very strong Pokemon was to use one of the most unlikeliest Pokemon cards we had ever seen. And I guarantee you will not guess what that Pokemon was. What was the focal point of his deck? It was none other than Stunfisk. This little guy for a DC did 30 times each one of your Pokemon that have any damage counters on it. This doesn't sound too crazy, but when combined with damage movers and electro powers, it actually started to add up quite fast. Not to mention, Shrine of Punishment is an absolutely crazy stadium in its own right, capable of putting 6 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in between turns. Spiritomb was the backup attacker, and quite honestly, Spiritomb was good enough to the point where we actually saw it become its own archetype later on. Also paired with Buzzwole for some good type coverage and a big hefty swing, and Hunter had an incredibly strong one prize focused deck, capable of standing toe to toe with anything in the meta. And this deck took him all the way to top 8 of the biggest event of the year, Columbus International. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, it really helps me out.